stuff.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been such a great conference so far. I've really enjoyed the diversity of things we've been talking about. My name is Oliver Holtaway. Among the many things I do, I'm involved with the community ownership movement in the UK. In particular, I've been involved with Bath City Football Club, a small football club out in Bath, where I'm from, which we recently, last year, took from private ownership into community ownership. So like about 40 or 50 other football clubs around the UK, we raised a lot of money from the community to buy a majority stake, and we now control the club on a sort of democratic, mutual, cooperative basis. And what I wanted to talk about today was, or what I wanted to kind of think through today, is what innovation and maintenance mean in the context of these kind of community takeovers, in the context of community ownership. I'll start by briefly talking about the campaign itself and how language of innovation and language of maintenance played a part in trying to inspire people to get involved with the campaign. And then I'll probably spend more of my talk considering how the innovations that have occurred have created new maintenance obligations and how we're dealing with that in terms of our division of labour. So starting with the campaign, like most community takeovers, you usually have to raise a large sum of money in order to take over the thing you're trying to take over. We're talking here about private assets. So, a private business like a football club or a pub is another common example, where for some reason they're facing commercial pressures or under stress or under strain, and you need to inspire people to see a better future for that football club or pub that they'll put the money into, but also win an argument around why a community ownership model will succeed where a private ownership model will fail. And looking back to the language that we used around the Bath City campaign, and I think it's quite common language for these kind of campaigns, we talked a lot about revitalization, about renewal, about refreshing the asset, about attracting fresh ideas, fresh skills, fresh talent. So we were really leaning into, I think, the language of innovation, more so than maintenance. And in fact, we even, to some extent, were saying that one of the flaws with the private ownership model, and bearing in mind this is at a club where we always rely on volunteers because it's a small amount of income. With the private ownership model, you had a handful of private owners who were running the club on a voluntary basis, and they only had time for maintenance. They only had time just to keep the basic compliance going with the club, and there was no room for creativity, strategic thinking, or innovation. So the story we told and getting people excited about it was really leaning towards this sense of it'll be new, it'll be fresh, it'll be revitalized. Now, how is that supposed to happen? Here, we started to lean into the language of maintenance, because we said, if there are more owners, if there's a wider ownership base, there'll be more people who feel invested and involved in maintaining it. It's the argument of if you actually own something, you will do a better job of maintaining it. It's a slightly problematic argument, but that was the argument we were using. But for the most part, we were inspiring people through creativity, innovation, renewal. This worked. It was successful in terms of the campaign hitting its target. We raised at Bath City £365,000 and took a majority stake. About 600 people contributed to that and became members of this new cooperative. And we took control in April last year. So what's happened since then? We certainly have had a lot of innovation and new thinking and new things happening. And that certainly has created a whole host of new maintenance obligations. At the most fundamental level, the innovation is our model, because we're now a cooperative, essentially cooperatively run as a majority shareholder. Cooperatives are nothing new, but in football they're relatively new. In British football they're relatively new. To make that happen, we had to create all kinds of new democratic mechanisms. People had to write standing orders, election policies, procedures, essentially create sort of a democratic manual to actually run the club. This then created a host of maintenance obligations around governance, maintaining a membership list, tracking subscriptions of people paying into their membership, running elections, having election observers, minutes of meetings, and basic commitments to member communication and transparency. All of this kind of takes some work. And I think if we're being honest, for the first year, we have faced some challenges in actually delivering on the promises we made to members around the amount of democracy and transparency they would receive, because many of the people who designed the system, I'm one of them, ended up stepping away for various reasons and kind of left the manual, handed the manual over, but it wasn't always read, it wasn't always followed through, it wasn't always understood. So I think there's still work to do there in terms of embedding the democracy element of the community ownership model, at least at our club. Turning to the operations of the club, how the club is kind of engaging with the community, again, we're doing lots of new things. The marketing and the branding of the club is completely transformed from a very low base to very kind of high frequency, high tempo, and high quality, I think, level of communication. The match day experience has been transformed. There are more people involved. There's more for families to do. There's more elements to the match day experience. And our efforts to engage the community in Bath, both business, charity, other kind of organisations, has become a lot more structured and is just a lot richer. And we're seeing a lot of benefit from that. And there is a real sort of new energy in the club. But how has that happened? And again, what kind of maintenance obligations have been created? Did this volunteer army arrive that we promised? Sort of. It's a slightly mixed picture in terms of who's actually stepped forward. There's not much evidence from what we can see that the new owners, those 600 people, have become any more inclined than they were before to volunteer in kind of maintenance type roles. There were people who were already doing it, who bought in, and there are a few kind of notable exceptions of people who did sort of put their money forward and then say, right, I may as well come in and make this work if I put my money in. But for the most part, people seem to have taken the approach, well, I've given you my money, and now you go and do it. We have attracted people, I think, after the fact. A lot of our greatest kind of new volunteers didn't put in money initially, didn't know about the whole community takeover, but now that we've done that, they are attracted to the idea of the club, and they sort of come in, and that includes students. We build links with the universities in Bath and the college, professionals who want to kind of lend their professional skills to the club, and children as well, kind of teenagers and below. Thinking about those new volunteers who are kind of coming in to help the club, if you try and get a kind of breakdown of how many are coming into sort of innovation roles or kind of new things, and how many are coming in to do maintenance roles, I guess the fear was always that everyone would want to come in and do the new things, and no one would want to wash the dishes, so to speak. In the event, it's been fairly even, I would say. It's probably a bit more difficult to find the maintainers than the innovators, but we have found some. People have come forward to do things like to literally maintain the pitch, to work the turnstiles, to deliver posters in all the pubs and everything. So as well as having the kind of creative minds coming in and developing the amazing new poster campaign, we are finding people who actually go around and put the posters up. But it's slightly more difficult. I think the main difference, to some extent, is maybe my own personal interpretation, but one of the main differences is that we don't quite understand why the maintainers come forward. We understand why creators come forward and do creative things. We understand why the head of a brand agency in Bath comes forward and wants to launch a new brand campaign. We're not quite sure why a senior charity professional puts his hand up to say, I'll just organise the delivery of the posters. We don't quite know why. And it just seems very kind of different reason for different people, which makes it difficult to kind of be strategic about how you recruit and retain and keep volunteers happy. You don't quite understand what's motivating them. So that said, we have a good mix of kind of both innovators and maintainers, but it must be recognised that the innovations are creating more maintenance obligations, more new maintenance obligations, on top of the ones that we already had anyway, than the volunteer structure itself can handle. We did anticipate this, so as part of our business plan as a community and club, we made provision for a paid general manager. So we have a general manager who's paid to have certain roles and responsibilities that she takes on, but one kind of additional role that's kind of evolved is that she has essentially become sort of a backstop, or sort of kind of excess of reserve capacity to take on the maintenance obligations from all the new ideas coming forward that haven't yet been absorbed by the volunteer structure. So I guess that, and this is challenging for her, and it probably takes up a disproportionate amount of her time. So looking to the future, I think we essentially have two challenges that we are looking to achieve at Battersea. And I suppose that the way I would kind of conceptualize this would be, the first is, how do you build a sort of membrane between your backstop, your paid backstop, the maintainers who will come in and organise the pitch or wear the mascot uniform and just do those day-to-day things that have to be done. And in between that, you need a sort of a volunteer layer of sort of maintenance managers, or people to maintain the maintainers, almost, and do this quite specific work of, I'll give you a couple of examples. I've already talked about the posters, so as well as people who will say, I don't mind putting a few up in my neighbourhood, just post them to me, you need to find that person who keeps that list, who makes sure all the bits of Bath are being covered, who then makes sure collects the posters each month, mails them out. That kind of role, that kind of maintaining the maintainers. Another example would be our mascot. We have a mascot which is a pig, for historical reasons, going back to the founding of Bath by King Bladud, so we have Bladud the pig. There's about 4 or 5 people who, for some reasons known amongst themselves, volunteer to dress up as this pig, and our match days run around, and when we do our kind of schools program, we'll go to schools, we'll take part in these events. And at first, it was the paid general manager would have to organise all that. The pig now has a handler, so we now have a kind of a pig mascot agent, kind of farms people out, at certain times. So we found that person. Another quite interesting one is we've on match days now, when the players come out at the start of the match, we have kind of local school kids form a guard of honour and they sort of wave flags and all sort of thing. And there, again, the general manager set that up and would oversee it. And there was one day when she was just kind of distracted or just couldn't get back, she had to deal with some other emergency. And a 13-year-old female girl volunteer just stepped forward and just kind of took charge of the situation and made sure everyone was standing in the right place, because she'd done it a few times before. And she now manages that. That's now her job. So she's sort of taken on that. So I guess, thinking about the types of leadership, just moving to a space where there's kind of distributed leadership, where people will take on these little tasks that almost sit just one level above the actual maintenance, if that makes sense. Maintaining the maintainers, kind of building that membrane out, I think is quite important. But then again, so that's a kind of structural or an organisational thing. I think to achieve that and to get more people maintaining in general, we need to look at ways of fostering a culture of maintenance, kind of celebrating maintenance. There's one example of that I think is quite good, and we should maybe do more of. It's something that I would almost call, an academic might call performative maintenance. The example I would use would be last summer. We did a big sort of event called Paint the Park. So Torrington Park is our ground. So Paint the Park was saying to the whole community, we just become community owned, saying to everyone who just bought the club, let's all go down 2 Saturdays this summer, and we will, paint and sweep and strip old paint away, just basically freshen the appearance of the whole ground up before the start of the season, and have pizzas and beers afterwards. When we first went to the people who had always done that and said, we want to do this and open it up to everyone, have a big make a whole big event of it, they sort of said, well, we did that 10 years ago, and actually, you know what, it's more work than it's worth. When you've got people coming in who barely know which end of the paintbrush to hold, is it really worth it? It's more efficient if we just don't do that. And we had to make the case of saying, well, actually, this is as much about ritual, as much about a kind of community building and celebration that we should all be willing to pitch in these kind of very basic tasks that aren't just about us kind of, doing our own special, skill or whatever. This is really about ritual and community building. And we went ahead and did it. It was very successful. A lot of people came down, and then and those people were swayed. The original people who were sceptical were swayed to the wisdom of the idea. And so I think building more of those kind of rituals, and in football, of course, it's seasonal, so you sort of have inbuilt rituals. building in that kind of ritual and thinking more about how you can be performative around celebrating maintenance is something for us to investigate more in the future. And I will certainly go back from this conference with ideas from that. So thank you very much.